So I'm going to go ahead and get started while Joe makes her way back up here, because I know nobody wants to be between their audience and lunch, right? Okay, so tell me a little bit about this. What we are going to talk about today is some of our poverty-informed practices. And where this comes from is largely based on the work of Dr. Donna Beagle. Has anybody heard of her or heard her talk? I like looking around up there. I think I saw maybe one or two hands. Okay, Dr. Donna Beagle is an amazing speaker, much like we've already had this morning. And her experience growing up in poverty, as well as the amount of time she has spent studying poverty, has led her to create a company called Communication Across Barriers. We were lucky enough in March of 2020, the Tennessee Board of Regents brought Dr. Beagle in to speak with us and do a workshop. And it was probably one of the most eye-opening things I had ever experienced. I grew up in a family that, my parents worked and we did everything we could, but there were definitely some things that I knew made us different from my classmates and from my friends. But I have to be honest, there are so many things that we do that people do as parents, and that our parents do for us to mitigate, I think, the impact of poverty, and that we don't necessarily see it all the time. So your students may not even be aware of the experience that they're having or the situation that their family is in, but their parents know it, and you all know it as teachers. So then 2 weeks after I heard Dr. Beagle speak, COVID happened, and we all know what happened then, right? Whoosh, nothing. So after things opened back up and we started looking at new things, I should say, at the college, we were lucky enough to participate in one of her poverty immersion institutes. Then later, Jill wrote a grant for us, so we were able to participate in the coaching institutes. And so basically, all the information that we're sharing today is like this little teeny drop in the water, but hopefully it'll be enough to share with you to get you thinking and looking at things a little differently and maybe thinking of some ways you can help your students and their families. All right, so Jill's gonna come on up.
Good morning. I'm Jill Robbins. I'm the Director of Testing at Rome State. And I'm a loud talker, so it's hard for me to get acclimated to using a microphone since I'm naturally a loud talker anyway. So what we're going to do to get started off is pop quiz time. Teachers love those, don't you? So a few true-false questions for you in regard to poverty. So, the true or false. The federal poverty guideline is an accurate indicator of how many people live in poverty in America.
Smart group. They know.
Very good. So, did you tell them about Nikki?
Yeah, they did it. They did.
Good deal. Yeah, if you're on there, you can use a little handy technology up there. So, does everybody know what the federal poverty guideline is? No. What it is, back in the 60s, these economists decided to get together and come up with an indicator for our poverty guideline, our poverty level. So what those brilliant people did is they decided that about a third of the income of families go to groceries. So they take this number and they multiply it by 3. And that's how much money you need to have. If you have anything less than that, you are in poverty. So let's think about that. Groceries.
In the 1960s.
In the 1960s. I did have a list of how much things cost back then and how much they cost now, but it's too depressing to talk about. And what does the bulk of income go to today? Housing. Correct. So this guideline has not been updated since the 60s. And current statistics seem to believe that if it was updated to today's standards, that our poverty, the number of people in poverty would triple. Isn't that crazy? So, next one, true or false. The majority of Americans believe poverty is caused by people's behavior and bad choices. Think about that for a second. So that statement is true. It's very stereotypical. It's just part of our culture. It's what the media tells us. So we are led to believe that because of behavior and bad choices, people are living in poverty. Oh, yeah. I'm going to let Lisa share her sister's story.
And I'm sure my sister really appreciates this, but it's the best example of this. One of the things that you hear all the time is somebody's checking out at Walmart or Kroger's or whatever, and they got some Ghirardelli chocolate, or they got Nike shoes, or whatever, and people are like, oh, really, you're on food stamps, but you can afford that. And you know what? We've all done it. I'm ashamed to admit it, but yeah, we do it, right? We sit there and we're like, they're buying cigarettes. They can afford to buy their kids food. Okay, so not even thinking about the addictive nature of cigarettes, but that's a whole different topic. But my younger sister went through a pretty rough time, and right after she had her son, he was diagnosed with autism, Asperger's, there was a brain tumor, it was a lot when he was real little. And as he got into school, things did not get any easier for them. Her husband lost his job, she had some different things going on. They just didn't have a lot of money. And there were times when she said to me, I pay the bill when the color changes. So when it turns red, I know it's time. I have to pay this bill. And it was hard. It was really hard for her. But as my nephew grew up, he also grew to be very tall, like his dad. So in the 7th grade, he was almost 6 foot. He was biracial, and he was on the spectrum in like the 7th, 8th grade. He would have outbursts in school. And they lived in really white suburbia, Ohio. So you can imagine how his outbursts, which were totally typical of an individual on the spectrum at that age, encountering education and different experiences for the first time, he was treated with fear. He was threatened to be suspended. It was so many things. My sister would have done anything to keep him from getting picked on, to keep him from standing out, to keep him from, so he had name brand everything. Even if it meant that she was not buying groceries, my mom was helping her, even if it meant she was waiting for the colors to change on those bills, because she was not sending that child to school in anything but the best, because she didn't want him to have any more attention drawn to him. I have a hard time saying that was a bad choice, because that was just a decision she felt that she had to make. So, just perspective.
Another one that I hear quite a bit is you see an unhoused person that may have a pet, maybe a dog following around with them, or sitting there with them. Well, that might be the only companionship that person has. Also might be, they need the protection. So when you see someone like that, you're like, well, they can't even afford to feed themselves. Why not a dog? Keep that in mind, Okay, moving on. Parents who do not go to school conferences don't care about their children. Is that true or false? It is absolutely false. And as educators, I'm sure that you know that. But one of the reasons that a parent may not be able to come to the conferences because they're working. Privilege has its place. I mean, if you have sick time or vacation hours or whatever that you can use to take off and go to your child's conference, that's privilege. So, Head Start, the preschool program for children in poverty, is available for all 4-year-olds who live in poverty. True or false? You all know that too, don't you? In the school system. Makes sense. But yeah, statistics show that about half of of the children that should be in preschool are not. They're on a waiting list or something of that nature. So these kids are not getting that pre-education that they need to start school. And studies show that preschool is so very important for socialization skills and getting them to that level that they need to go into elementary school.
So one of the things we want to do is we got to go into this. Jill is going to talk to us about all the different types of poverty and some things that you may notice in your students and some traits that you'll probably no doubt recognize. But as we go in with these guiding thoughts, some of the things that I want you all to think about is that the first thing is that we're never really taught about poverty as in any of our, and I don't know for sure about K-12 education. I can say in higher education we never learned a darn thing about working with people who came from poverty and the different perspectives they might have. Instead, TV shows, and I mean, you can go as far back as Beverly Hillbillies or any of those other shows and think, this is what we learned people in poverty were all about. Was from those TV shows, from stereotypes, from judgments, from misinformation. That's where what we know about people in poverty often comes from. So we want our work to be really based on a growth mindset. That students who are from poverty and even their families, they can learn, they can grow, they can do things different. The things that they have overcome in their lifetimes, honestly, sometimes are the things that we cannot even imagine. We'll never advocate, and we always have to reassure our faculty of this at our college level, that we're never advocating for expectations to be lowered. Instead, what we're saying is get those expectations up there. If you expect students to be amazing and to do amazing things, and you build the scaffolding to help them get there, they will do it. Especially all of you as teachers. I know growing up for me, I wanted to be you. When I was little, I wanted to be my teachers. I loved school. I wanted to learn. And I look forward to going back every year. I don't know how my teachers felt about us. I had two sisters. I loved it, and I wanted to be a teacher because the teachers who influenced me so much in especially elementary school in a little town in Iowa. So raise those expectations and help them get there. And then work with your students and their families. Some of what Jill was talking about with the parent-teacher conferences, one of the things that I learned in my work with students is a lot of times parents are definitely terrified to come in with their students. They're afraid to come see us at college. They're afraid to come to their parent-teacher conferences because you are an idol to them. You are everything. You are so smart. You are so much smarter than them. And they're afraid that, in their minds, it's probably true too, but anyway, they are so afraid that they are going to embarrass themselves or their student in your presence. And so the more we can do to help them connect to resources, to be comfortable coming in and talking to you, the better we will be. So Jill's going to talk to us about different types of poverty.
Yeah, give me some. You have to stand here. Hey, can you leave your phone? Let me get coordinated here. The clicker in one hand, the microphone in the other. Here in a minute, I'll be switching. I'll be trying to talk to you like this. So I'm trying to mind myself on that. So poverty has many types. They may share in common their fight for basic survival necessities, but they differ in self-identity, opportunities, and resources. And so I'm going to run through these with you. We're from East Tennessee, so I think that the majority of us are well versed in what poverty is, just basically because we live so close to it. But let's run through these and see what the challenges are for each type. So generational poverty is the first one. And this quote by Reuben says, "I just wanted to survive and grow up. I never really thought about being anything. I never considered myself to be worthy to be anything." So generational poverty are where families are in the lowest form of poverty through several cycles of generation. Generational poverty is usually on financial assistance part-time jobs, but usually it is just on government assistance. Typically, this is one of the really important things that we'll talk about throughout this session, is that typically no one in the immediate circle of families has benefited from education. Also, they lack support. There's no one that they can go to that has been through the process of signing up for preschool or, choosing classes for the different things in high school. So there's no one to go to get help. Being in school and facing its demands is in sharp contradiction with the pressures and realities of their lives. So a lot of this is based on college when we do our presentations for the different colleges, but this is also very, very much in line with K through 12. But you might want to think about it's their parents that are dealing with these issues, which is going to affect the children. Right? So we'll talk about struggles in a moment when we get through these. Next category is working poor. Timothy says, we went to school to eat, not to learn or get educated. I didn't even know what get educated meant. I thought if I could work with my hands, I would be fine. So some of these attributes, the working poor, they live paycheck to paycheck, often in fear of being laid off or having hours cut. Factory and construction workers, food services, entry-level office and sales positions is where you see a lot of working poor. After housing expenses are met, there is little money for other needs or extras. Very few have health insurance or get regular health care. Due to the inaccurate federal poverty guidelines, we are ineligible for assistance. High school graduation is often seen as unattainable. And they see their poverty as a deficiency, that they're not as good as everybody else and they haven't been able to make it work. The working class. So Maria says, I don't want to be an example of the stereotype that says, if you work hard, you can pull yourself up by the bootstraps. That's just not true. My success is not because I worked harder than somebody else, just as it's also not true that my best friends are in prison or dead because they weren't working hard enough. People are willing to work hard. There are just roadblocks over and over again. So think about this. A parent has to bring their child to school. What if the car breaks down? What if they don't have anybody to call on to see if they can run and get the child and bring them to school? And they're late. And even our working class poor rarely has money to fall back on, right? They're just living paycheck to paycheck. Some do have a level of post-secondary education. Of course, their income depends on hourly wages. They don't have such stable employment status. It's iffy. And while they might have some financial buffer, it's often insufficient for long-term security, making them more vulnerable to economic downturns, which takes us to the next section. Temporary situational poverty. Teague says, I was in my first year of college and my dad lost his job. Then they took our house and we had to live in our car. Occasionally we had money to stay in a hotel. We took baths and sinks. We parked next to buildings that had free Wi-Fi. We lost most of our possessions because we couldn't afford the storage rental fee. I had to drop out of school to work full time. It was the hardest 2 years of my life. I am thankful to be back in school and to have somewhere to live. So, our temporary situational poverty are people who have been laid off. They've lost their job. They had an illness and they had to stop working. Let's go back to our struggle. So think about it. What can you think of that would be a struggle related to poverty? I mean, take my example. of the card. That's one of them. But it can be anything from emotional struggles. They don't feel like they are good enough. They feel like being in poverty is their fault, right? That's definitely a struggle. Absenteeism. You see a lot of that in school, a lot of tardiness. Yep. Go back a little more. Health issues, lack of assistance, less likely to have support from a family or friends. I talked about that one. I think that's a really important one because they don't have someone to go to for help. And even if they do, say they go to sign up for assistance, the person that is helping them is not explaining the situation very well. They've not been in their position, so they say, here's the forms, you fill these out, and then you drop them back off at the office. Right. Get Lisa back to where she needs to go to.
Okay, so then some other things to think about is how these things all work together. So when you have folks who are from a marginalized community already, and then you add the layer of poverty on top of it, it makes things even more different for them. The way that they have interacted with the world and the way that the world treats them can be layers and layers of trauma on top of what being in poverty might do. The other thing that I think is really interesting, and it's something that I've been reading as much as I can about lately, has been this idea of isolation, where something I never realized growing up or even in college or anything was thinking about who we socialize with. So oftentimes people from poverty are only with other people from poverty. Middle class people tend to socialize with middle class people and so on and so forth, right? So they don't get a chance. People from poverty don't get a chance to learn sometimes what it means to be in college. Like, it's a whole different language. What does it mean when they come to school? If their parents didn't have an opportunity to really engage with school or to be part of the school experience, to participate in after-school activities, those kinds of things, then the students aren't going to know that language either. And I know there's a really big focus at the college level for first-generation college students and things, but I think back to, my parents didn't do after-school activities and things like that because they went to work. They were doing other things. And when I first went to school, I didn't do a lot of after-school things either because my parents worked. There was nobody to pick me up after school. If I didn't take the bus home, I wasn't coming home. So, which they might have liked, I don't know. But I just wasn't allowed to do those kinds of things. And so it really wasn't until I was in high school that I had a chance to be able to do some of those things. So when we think that maybe either the students are, they don't care, they don't want to be involved, or their parents don't care, or they don't want their kids to be involved, there may be a lot of other things in play where they just don't know how to behave. They don't know how to model that behavior. And then another thing, and this mostly comes from a book by Matthew Desmond, who wrote Poverty by America. And he talks a lot about these punitive structures that are, again, something that I had the privilege of not necessarily realizing, where, okay, if you don't have a car and you're forced to shop really close to home, what are the prices like in those corner stores? They're higher. When you go in to buy a gallon of milk, so they opened the Dollar General Market right down the road from us in Kingston. Anybody else live in Kingston? Kingston people? Okay, so they opened the Dollar General Market right down the road. And we were kind of excited about that. You can go in there and you can get some things for less, but then one day we went in looking for a head of lettuce, 3 times as much as Farmers Market. 3 times. At the Dollar General Market. I'm like, come on, this is like the $10 General Market. So prices are a lot more, but if you don't have the privilege of having a car, you don't have a choice. The fee structures for bank accounts. If you have a low balance, so this hit me in college every time I turned around because I was not the most responsible. I was constantly paying those $10, $25
fees because I wasn't keeping my $100 balance in my account. Well, now how does that make sense? So I can't afford to keep $100, but we're going to charge you for it. We teach them to keep their money at home. The payday and the title loan fees are crazy. They are so expensive, but in the event of an emergency, what choice do you have? If you don't have a savings, if you've not been lucky enough to be able to do that, then sometimes you don't have a choice. And then the one that makes me most crazy is our unhoused and homeless people who, I found out recently that there was I'm going to try to be really careful here, a service in one of our areas that would not help people if they didn't have a driver's license. And so the problem is you can't get a driver's license if you don't have an address. And so here's a social services agency that is supposed to be helping people. Who could I argue needs the help the most, but they won't help you because you need an actual driver's license, not an ID, a driver's license. So there are just a lot of roadblocks that we put up for people. We're going to shift a little bit now and try to look at this activity. So we passed out before this some sheets. And at the top of that is mostly these instructions. And there's going to be more QR codes in a minute, so if you want to get your phones out. We're going to ask everyone to put themselves in this scenario where you are the sole supporter for your family, 5-year-old and an infant. You're working 40 hours a week, making $12 an hour. You have no high school education and limited skill, but this is a good job. So we're going to take a look at that list of bills that are on that handout we gave you, and I'm going to put it up here in a minute. And you're going to think about, and you don't have to write anything, think about what items you might pay, what items you're going to leave for maybe next month or until the bill changes colors, if you have that option, or what you might not do. And just take a couple minutes, talk with your neighbors if you want. If you don't have a paper near you, you can use somebody else's. It's not like, this is not ready, no worries. So your total monthly bills come to $36.95. Your income is $19.22.
This is great. You can see on the screen word cloud. Bigger words means more people are putting that one in. So I would say that it looks like most folks are saying groceries, people are saying rent, electric, water, daycare. Those things are all ones that are coming in pretty high, as expected. The one caveat I might throw out is that, and this may or may not be true, I should be more familiar with Anderson County. Jill, you live in Oak Ridge, you might be able to help me with this, but free food options. Free food options, like not just pantries, but the churches that serve meals and things. This is one that you can probably tell by my accent, I'm not from here originally. One of the things I have been most impressed with in moving to East Tennessee, and I lived in Texas, I lived in Ohio, I think I told y'all I grew up in a small town in Iowa. The churches here, I don't think that there is a day of the week that you cannot get a free meal somewhere. And I think that just means so much to the people who live in those communities, and I love that so much. So there are lots of ways to lower grocery bills by looking at what the free options are, and then the food pantries that exist as well, which you may or may not know, we have food pantries on our campuses for our students, and they are highly utilized, highly, like so many places. Okay, let's turn, these are right, this is what we usually see, to looking at what items we might not pay. And hang on, I gotta click the button so that you can enter answers. Okay, what are the things that you're going to skip for now? I'm seeing a lot of cable TV up there. And the birthday party gift. Car insurance, health insurance, yeah, exactly.
So some things that hit me, so when I got divorced early, or in my life, much earlier, and one of the things that, not to share a whole lot of personal information, but you can probably tell I'm not shy, my ex-husband took out a lot of credit cards cards in my name, and I didn't know about them until we filed for divorce. And so when he left, my share of the divorce debt was like $25,000, and that was just credit cards. And that was a huge hit to a brand new professional. I had also just started my PhD. I mean, it was crazy. Anyway, that was the first thing I did was call and cut out my cable. I kept the internet just because I really needed it for work and to be able to continue doing my PhD. But that was the very first thing I did, and I remember people were like, so what do you do? And I'm like, I have a VCR. And I remember thinking that I had hit it really big when I finally could afford Netflix, when they used to send you discs in the mail. And I thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread. That was almost as good as having TV again. So yeah, you guys are making all the decisions I think so many people are forced to make. And we appreciate the questions that came up from some of you. When we do this activity in smaller groups, you really start to see a lot of the emotion that can come into this. And so I want to take a minute and think about that. For those of you who were deep into the activity and you were wanting to know more about the life of this person, how does it feel to have to make decisions like this? Many of you may have had to do this before, but how do you feel when that happens? I just saw the desperate pop up. It's just, and don't we think that when parents are having all of these feelings, because there are certainly no positive feelings out there, right? When parents are having all of these feelings, we know that the kids pick up on that, right? Kids know when there's something wrong at home. And so they come to school and they may be more quiet, they may be withdrawn, they may not be turning in homework, and honestly their parents probably didn't have time the night before to make them do it. So there are just so many things that they will bring with them that you may be the only person in their life who notices in that moment. And so it's kind of like the speaker before us said, taking a couple minutes to say, are you okay? And to try to open those doors for communication so that maybe we can connect them to some resources. And I think that's exactly where we're going next, is Jill is going to talk about, oh, whoops, I was skipping, sorry. Okay, we're gonna spend a couple minutes on oral and print communication. And this is one of those things that is kind of, again, it's one of those things I just never realized. When we think about folks from poverty tend to favor a more oral communication style, right? So it is very much about relationships. It is everything's spoken and it's spontaneous. I think about my grandmother teaching me when I was really little, working with me to make her cheesecake. She didn't have a recipe written down. It was not do this, then do this. It was a whole lot of, well, we're gonna do this, and then, oh, I forgot this, and so we gotta find this, and you know, so 10-year-old me really just wanted to run the beaters. And so it was all these things, but it was oral, it was spontaneous. It tends to be kind of a big picture sort of thing. They're very focused on the present and what's happening right now. And they're also really comfortable showing emotions. So when they're angry, they're angry. When they're upset, they're just upset. And it's gonna be all over their faces and all over their sleeve. And sometimes we don't know what to do with that as humans. We don't know how to handle people who are really highly emotional. Whereas when we get into this print culture, right, everything is really orderly. You know, you send home a supply list. You send a letter home to families and you're saying, we're doing this thing on this day at this time, and yet you know some kid is showing up without their permission slip and maybe without the money from their parent and those kinds of things, because the parent is living in this spontaneous kind of go with the flow and oh my gosh kind of thing, and they're just not able to follow this rigid structure that we really like in our classrooms and in our lives. We live by the structure, right? We live by our lesson plans and what we're doing. So they just have a little bit more trouble with that. So some of the things that we can do to help people who are from an oral culture learn, there are ways you can help them feel confident. And there's a lot of research that shows that if a student believes that someone else believes in them, that's a lot of believing, that they are going to do better. If they think that you think they can do it, they're going to reach really high to do that. If you hand them a test and say, I know you can do this, they're going to feel good about it and they're going to try just even that much harder. Their spread out repetition is really great. So having them make a list, setting it aside, reminding them again later, don't forget about this, don't forget about this. Maybe sending multiple letters home, which you probably already do, but all these kinds of things will help them transfer that into their longer term memories. Sharing information in multiple ways. We've heard a couple times people talking about students with disabilities, and that's one of the areas I work with at college too. We know that not everybody processes things really well. I remember saying to my dad not long ago that I had a student who needed a reader for a test, and my dad said, kids in college, you can't read? I'm like, no, the kid reads fine. It's a processing disorder. It's a different, the brain works differently. And so speaking sometimes is the best way for them to learn, because when they look at that page, it's not working for them. Or like dyslexia, things move around on them. It's really hard for them to take that in. So if you can give it to them written, you can give it to them verbally, as much information as you can give them in the most possible ways. I'm one of those people who I do better with written directions. I like a step-by-step, and then I kind of check it off as I go. Using gestures and facial expressions to help indicate. This was a big thing during COVID when we all had to wear the masks. My niece went to kindergarten during COVID, and so she was remote the first year, and so that was fine. Then she went to school, first grade, and she had to be in a classroom, so learning to sit still when there are other kids within about a 3-foot radius after being at home for a year was a little bit tough. God bless that teacher. God bless all of you, because wow, that must have been tough. But then she also couldn't read the facial expressions. She didn't know if people were smiling, or if they were laughing, or if they were being nice to her. She didn't know because we didn't see it. So there's so many different things we can do to help those folks. Now we're going to get into the meat of we called our grant Care, Communicate, and Connect. This is the grant we got from the college 2 years ago, I guess now. And because our message to our faculty, and I think again to all of you, is that if you can care about your students, you've got a way to connect with them or to communicate with them, and then you can connect. And that's how you're going to be able to open that door to making a really big difference in their lives. So Jill's going to hit that.
So yeah, here are our 3 C's of breaking barriers that lead you to poverty-informed practices. To care, create a welcoming environment that fosters belonging. And I know you all, as educators that have your own rooms, I'm so envious that you get to decorate your rooms and everything at the first of the year to make them into the welcoming environment that you do. That's really cool. I love it. Acknowledge people frequently. Make sure they know you notice them. So you look at people when you talk to them, you pay attention to them, you really hear them, you don't just kind of, let it go through. Meet people where they are. Focus on their strengths and build on them. So, you know about this. So if you have a kid in your class that does exceptionally well in English or writing, then you're going to foster the encouragement to keep doing that. Make learning and growth steps relevant and set people up for success. Learn to recognize the signs. So how do you recognize the signs? You listen to people, you pay attention to them. Have they been tardy more lately? More absences? Are they not answering questions in class like they used to? You know, the signs that somebody may be struggling. That's part of caring. And tap into empathy. I can't ever say this word. Empathy. Kindness begins with the understanding that we all struggle. And I know all of you are very aware of compassion fatigue, aren't you? Yeah, as teachers. So when you start feeling that way and maybe you are not paying as close of attention to people, or you know, it's just been one of those weeks, kind of slow down. You need to practice your own mental health and take care of yourself, right? So you can get out of that compassion fatigue and move on to your students. So we've cared, we've paid attention, we've talked to the students, their parents. We recognize that something might be going on. So how do we communicate with them? One of the biggest things I find helpful is telling stories because it makes you more relatable. I work for the college, so a lot of times when we do professional events, I'll wear sleeves, like long sleeves, and sweat to death. But I have an arm full of tattoos. So when I'm trying to portray this professionalism, even though tattoos I know are not really looked down upon as much as they used to be. But my grandfather used to tell me, I was a paralegal back years and years and years ago. My grandfather used to tell me that I fit right in, that I was relatable to my clients, and they should be able to talk to me pretty easily. But that works well for me too in the college setting. So when I have to meet with students, if I have on short sleeves, they see, you know, this crazy old woman with all these tattoos up her arm. But it does make me, you know, a little bit more approachable. They're like, oh, wonder how she got this position, you know. Crazy woman. But storytelling is a good way, and like we just heard from Lisa, the oral communication, it goes right in with that, talking to people. So we also want to help students feel confident, remind them that you are here to help them succeed. That is our job. That is why we go to work every day, is to see our students succeed. Share information in multiple ways, oral and print, and repeat it frequently. That's what I tell my testing proctors. They sometimes get in a bad habit of saying, oh, well, it's on our webpage. Just go to our webpage. You can't just tell them to go to our webpage. Some people, if they don't know how to go to a webpage, then they're not going to go to a webpage. So I always say, you know, walk them through it, say, here, this is where you get to it. If they ask, you know, what are our hours? It doesn't take that long to go ahead and tell them what hours are. Yeah. I know it's so much easier. Yeah, it's on our webpage. Just go to our webpage. Just give them the information. Take a moment. They may not have internet to go to our webpage, so. Also, let's change some rules, make the rules less based on middle class values and priorities, and understand what the world of poverty is like. So if you don't know that much about poverty, which I think we all do in this room, but if you don't research it, I mean, it's a huge difference. So, you know, pay attention to that. So we've paired, we've communicated, and now let's connect students to what they need. So educate yourself with resources that you can share. You can check our webpage for that because we have tons of resources. Sorry, I'm saying that. But we do. That was part of our grant and part of our CARES program is we have compiled a list of resources available for our students, or for anybody if you wanted to look at it. It is there for our different counties that we do serve. So if you have a student that does need some help with getting groceries, or parents, then you can check the website and see that we do have resources available, and you can point them in that direction, print it off. You can print off the list for them and give it to them, and you'll have it. Also, do not just tell them, show them. help students build their address book and introduce them to people who can provide resources and opportunities. Huge one here. Like we've been talking about, those in poverty seldom have a mentor or a family member that they can go to help them with these issues, a friend. They don't have those things. So we want to be able to, to provide that information to them or be that person to do it. If they need help filling out the forms, we fill out the forms for them. So we want to do that. I'm a first generation college graduate, and I was lucky enough to have, and I grew up in poverty, just so I was lucky though to have my godmother, my fairy godmother, that was a friend of my mom's who had gone to college. So she was able to help me, and I had to have her. I wouldn't have known what to do. My parents didn't know what to do. So she guided me through the process of how to do that. She was extremely helpful. Okay, also encourage students to not be afraid to ask for help. Everyone needs help from time to time. We need to normalize people asking us for help or telling students, ask. I mean, I don't know, I can't read your mind. So if you need something, ask me. I might be able to help you, and if I can't, I will surely find someone who can. Okay, that was it.
So you guys have probably all seen this before. It's been pretty commonly used, but it's really one of my favorite things to share with folks who don't understand why we might provide accommodations to students with disabilities, or why we might grant somebody a little bit of grace with some things. It's because sometimes treating everybody equally is not really in their best interest. And so we like to just do a reminder of that. And then these are our two quotes that we want to share from Dr. Beagle's book. Her book, which I think Jill might have with her, is called See Poverty Be the Difference. It's a fantastic resource for people who want to learn a little bit more about how you might be able to help a family in poverty. The first one is really the one we're trying to help our faculty embrace fully and wholeheartedly, and that is, if you're judging, you cannot connect. If you can't connect, you cannot communicate. If you cannot communicate, you cannot educate. And if you cannot educate, then you can't eradicate poverty. So many of our students really rely on us to teach them these skills that they need so that they can go out, whether they're going to college, whether they're going to get a job, no matter what, they need you in their lives, and they need the knowledge that you have to pass on. And then the last thing is really in line with what Jill was talking about with having resources. People who are living in poverty need as many people in their address book who are not living in poverty as they have who are living in poverty, because those mentors serve as navigators for them. So you can serve, and I know this is a lot to ask of you guys. Teachers, we always ask for more and more and more and more. So I realize the burden that this comes with, but I think if you can connect with a parent of a student who really wants to do things different and who wants to learn and who wants to do better, you can be the person for them who is that resource, who will help them get out of this and to help them make life better for their families. And there have been studies that show that when somebody gets out of that and they go on to college, let's say, they can, or even if they just complete their high school degree, when they come from a family that does not do that, the ripple effect goes down 2 generations. So it's not just the parent, but it's also the student and the student's children as those come around. So it's just the impact that you all have in their lives just cannot be underscored. So that's our whole show. If you have questions, if you'd like to stick around. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Hey, let's give them another round of applause. My hope is that you understand it's about curriculum and things like that, but it's about the whole child. And we have to, as teachers and educators, we have to be that stopgap every day. So I'm going to leave you with these words, and I hope I can get it back from you. This year, This year, let's make every day count, okay? Thank y'all for coming. Have a great afternoon. I hope Mr. Myers has a traffic cop out there to take care of so we don't have to spend 30 minutes getting out.